This is going to be a kind of a highly scientific class this morning and what John Clayton's going to present, so start turning your science brains on. Or maybe you'll tell me at the end of this, that was easy peasy, why were you scared of that? And it's because I don't have a science brain. But in my mind, this is a little more technical of a class, at least in the main film part I'm going to show you. But this morning, we're going to make sure that works. I've lost my slides now. There we go. This morning, we're going to talk about as a matter of fact, and that's my clever play on words. We're going to talk about matter and the cosmos and the idea of was there a beginning or not. Okay? And that might have tipped my hand a little bit, but I want you to turn your thinking brains on. And I'm going to ask, and we'll get some audience input on this, but what I'm going to ask is that you start thinking about what would you say, what verse in the Bible is the most profound scripture? Not what's your favorite scripture, not what is possibly the most commonly quoted, but maybe if it's really that profound, it is most commonly quoted. And if this was the Family Feud, I would have taken the top 100 respondents and I would have put the top 7 on the board and you would have had 3 wrong guesses or you failed, right? Okay? We don't have 100 people in here. We may not get 100 responses, so it could even be the same response. But if I were to ask you what was the most profound scripture in the Bible, what would you say to that?
Beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
So Genesis 1:1 is on there, and I kind of tipped my hand a little bit. What else?
I think even deeper is in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
That was what one of my wife said. Okay. Others? John 3:16, I think, has got to make the list for just the profoundness of God loving the world so much, okay? And when I ask that, I guess what I'm getting to is there's a lot of inspirational scriptures. And I would say Romans, I actually read this the last time I led communion, where it talks about at the right time Christ loved us so much that he gave himself for us, like a specific act of Jesus Christ, okay? But as we define, as we come to this as Christians, and we would say, what's the most profound sense of what people struggle with in this world? They struggle with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. They struggle with John 3:16. How can you dare say this God is a loving God when I see all the horrible things in this world, right? And this world struggles with who Jesus Christ is. And you could point to John 1:1, you could point to Romans 3 or 4, whatever that was. These are the things that as a society we're struggling with. That if you talk about, and this being a very scientific presentation of evidences and talking to people who don't believe in the Bible, what are their hang-ups? What are their struggles with the idea of a Christian worldview? And if we get time to get there, I'll show you a video of a lady that is struggling with just that, okay? So we're going to be talking about the beginning, the cosmos, those kind of things. I'm going to show you 2 7-minute-long John Clayton videos, and then I want to spend 5 or so minutes discussing. And it can be what you heard, like just a comment of, hey, I like this, I didn't like that. I'm not here to defend John Clayton. If you disagree with him, I'm okay with that, and we're going to accept that, and we're going to go on. Okay, if you have a question, I've seen the video 3 times just to get ready for this class. So I've heard it a lot. And I know you're getting it for the first time. So there might be, what did he mean by that? And I'll do my best to represent what I've heard 3 times over, okay? So And to me, this is the most technical portion we've shown as far as it really being based in science. You're going to learn a lot about hydrogen. You're going to learn about helium. You're going to learn a lot about our sun. This is kind of cool stuff. And so we'll get into it. Maybe.
Now, here's another kind of evidence.
Can you go to the video? Well,
this is the sun.
Can we actually see him?
The sun is an incredible furnace made of its own fuel. Now, here's another kind of evidence that there was a beginning. This is the sun. The sun is an incredible furnace made of its own fuel. And it's interesting to realize that when you see pictures like this showing prominences and flares and all kinds of activity on the surface of the sun is burning. Now, I don't mean burning in the sense of a log in a fireplace burning. That's not what's going on here. This is a picture of the surface of the sun taken up close. It shows something called granulation. The sun is bubbling. It's sort of like water boiling on the stove. The material is moving to the surface and then collapsing back down. Now, if you have a pot of water boiling on the surface of the stove, where is the heat source? Is it at the surface of the boiling water? And the answer is pretty obvious on that, isn't it? It's under the pot. And the same thing is true here. The sun is not burning as a log in a fireplace burns. What's happening on the sun is something called thermonuclear fusion. Hydrogen atoms are being pushed together to make heavier elements. In the case of the sun, this is pretty much entirely helium. What's interesting is that the mass of the helium is less than the mass of the hydrogens that made it up, and that is released as heat and energy. This is the hydrogen bomb. This is thermonuclear fusion. The process can be carried on. The periodic chart is full of naturally occurring elements. We believe all of those elements were produced by the fusion of hydrogen to progressively heavier elements. Hydrogen makes helium. Helium fuses together to make carbon. You can keep moving through processes, most of which have been duplicated in the laboratory, which would suggest to us that we're made out of stardust, that this is the process by which the heavier elements that make up things on the earth and which make up us have been produced. What's interesting here is that hydrogen is a non-renewable source. Now, some of you say, well, no, that's not true. I mean, we can produce hydrogen in the laboratory by electrolysis and water. No, we're talking about the original production of the hydrogen itself, not splitting it off from some pre-existing material. There is no process that we observe in the laboratory or in nature which is producing hydrogen. The cosmological models that we have suggest to us that this process occurred in the conditions of what we have referred to as the Big Bang. So it's important to understand that the sun can be measured using the data that we have on the fusion of hydrogen. This is a picture of the sun using what is called a hydrogen alpha picture. The only light that exposes the film in this case is the light from hydrogen atoms. As you can see, there's much more detail available on the sun in hydrogen alpha pictures. You can do the same thing with helium and get a similar type of picture. Knowing the volume, knowing the mass, you can calculate what is taking place on the sun. Our calculations show that every second on the sun, somewhere around 564 million tons of hydrogen are turned into 560 million tons of helium, with 4 million tons of matter being released as energy. That happens every second on the sun. Incidentally, even though that process has been going on for who knows how long, the sun has only burned up 2% of its original hydrogen. You know, our problems with energy is not that the energy is not available, it's that we need to learn how to duplicate this process and utilize the energy the sun sends to us. The sun is an incredible furnace, a nuclear fire made of its own fuel that has been burning for who knows how long, and has only burned 2% of its original fuel. But it's not just the sun. Every star in the sky generates energy by the same process. When we look out into space and we see things like exploding galaxies, and we still don't understand everything that's going on in these processes, but we know hydrogen is the starting point for all of these reactions that we see in space. And even within our own solar system, we see massive amounts of hydrogen. Jupiter has the same percentages that the sun does of hydrogen and helium, virtually the same. And this is, again, a process that indicates the availability of hydrogen throughout the universe. As a matter of fact, Jupiter is almost a little solar system of its own. Its moons, and this is one of its moons you're looking at here, Io is the name of it, is very planet-like. That object in the corner is a volcano. And we have seen some of these moons that have water on them, apparently in significant amounts, which leads us to the question of whether there might be some forms of life in that system. But our point right here is that even though these major planets, that's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, have basically the same percentages of hydrogen as the sun, and even though the sun is made up of hydrogen, we are not running out of this resource. Now, remember what our purpose here. The question is, was there a beginning or was there no beginning? If there was no beginning, if the universe has existed for eternity, then what should be true of the amount of hydrogen we observe in the universe? Let me give you a little analogy here. You fill your car up with gas and you start to drive it. And you drive and you drive and you drive and you don't want to stop at a filling station because of the high price of gasoline. But if you keep doing that, what will eventually happen? Well, we all know the answer to that, don't we? You're going to run out of gas. We all understand that if you're going to drive the car, you got to put gas in the car over and over and over again. I have some kids that don't understand that, but most of us understand that. Now think. If every star, if every galaxy, if every protostar, every planetary system like Jupiter, if all of these celestial objects are turning hydrogen into heavier and heavier materials, and if that has been going on forever, how much hydrogen should be left in the creation? And it's just like the car, isn't it? We would have long ago run out of gas. But the fact is that the sun still has 98% of its original fuel. The fact is that when we look out into space, we see glowing clouds of hydrogen everywhere. When radio astronomers turn their radio telescopes out into space, they pick up the hydrogen 21 centimeter spectral line everywhere they look. The universe is full of hydrogen. And that could not be unless there was a beginning.
All of that made total sense to you, right? You at least got the car running out of gas analogy, right? I will try to surmise, and I'll take comments, as this universe is full of hydrogen, and hydrogen is ultimately what's making our sun burn, and hydrogen is what's making all of these stars burn, and it is significantly more what fueling our galaxy than any other matter, okay? And one of the questions is, well, if there's no beginning, then matter then becomes eternal. Can matter be eternal? And I am not enough of a scientist to probably totally answer that question. But what Mr. Clayton has said is hydrogen, which is one matter, one thing we look at, is not renewable, and therefore it is not eternal. Does that make sense? So if we are dealing with the major fuel system that is fueling, what happens if the sun goes away? Not just behind a cloud. We cease to exist, right? Life does not happen beyond the sun, okay? So if hydrogen is the component and it doesn't seem to be renewable, if you watch all of his video, I'm showing you 15 minutes of a 30-minute video today. He talks about the Big Bang Theory. He talks about a closed system versus an open system. He talks about a lot of things that I'm not showing you today, okay? And if you're not very scientific, what I just said, you made no sense, okay? So go back and Does God Exist.tv, lesson 3, you can watch the whole thing, okay? But hydrogen is not being shown as a matter that is forever. So therefore, it can't be eternal. And so it's a fact. As a matter of fact, remember that was my clever little line. As a fact, hydrogen is not renewable, therefore it is not eternal, and therefore we had to have a beginning. That's my brief summation. All right, did that do better than John Clayton? I don't know, okay? Questions, thoughts, comments on all of that? And I may not even set it up for that, so I'll give it a second.
What do you mean by not renewable?
Say that a little louder.
What do you mean by not renewable?
Again, I'm not John Clayton, but what that means is the amount of hydrogen that we have is all that we've got. Now, he just said the cosmos is full of it, but if there was, let's just say there was 100 gallons of it to start with, we'll never have 101 gallons. It's only diminishing, it's not renewable.
I'd say, to put it a different way, there's no scientifically observed process which is creating hydrogen. And everything else we see is created from that element. So like what put it there to begin?
Yeah. And I was thinking through, in my own little scientific brain, let's just deal with water, which is H2O, hydrogen's the H in that. It is water eternal. Okay, we know that the rains come down, it flows into the river, and it goes back to the ocean, and we have this cycle, okay? But in the middle of that, I drink some of that water. I'm not trying to be gross, but do I give it all back, or do I use some of it up? Well, that means I decreased the amount of water in this earth. And we have trees, and we have all kinds of things. Is water eternal? Well, what makes more water? Actually making more water. And he said, and this was a little more technical part, but remember, water has hydrogen in it. He said in a laboratory, we can take water and separate out the hydrogen, but that's not making more hydrogen. That's still the initial supply of it, okay? And I appreciate, Wes, you talk a little more scientifically than I do, and that's helpful for this. I appreciate that, so, okay? Other thoughts on, I know this is like crazy, but where I'm getting to, and we're going to talk about it hopefully if I have time at the end, is we're learning this to strengthen our faith, to get to more of an unshakable faith. Is there evidence that, and in this case, is there evidence of a beginning? And if there's evidence of a beginning, and there is something that we might go all the way to, it's factual that there's a beginning. Now, we're getting closer to what Genesis 1:1 says, and we didn't start with Genesis 1:1. We started with hydrogen. Does that make sense? Okay. So.
Larry, am I wrong when I go back to basic science when it said matter can neither be created nor destroyed? God put it here, there it is.
And I guess that's part of this struggle as we go through with it, well, if we're saying there's a beginning, then God created the matter. Can we get rid of the matter? And I've wrestled with that this week. I did not get a PhD in it, okay? So I'm still struggling that through. Maybe there's some other scientific people here. What do you think about that?
Well, matter cannot be created or destroyed, but one of the things that Einstein discovered is that matter and energy are interchangeable. And so matter can be converted into energy.
Yes.
And that's what he's talking about in the hydrogen fusion, is you take two hydrogen atoms, you put them together, and you have a helium atom. So you still have that, but the weight of that helium atom is less than the combination of the two. So some of that has been lost to energy, which is in the form of heat and light.
And that's part of what he said in his thing is that the sun has used up 2% of its hydrogen, and that hydrogen is gone. Okay? Kevin.
I'm just saying it in a different way, but the fact it's non-renewable means that hydrogen itself had to have a beginning, and from what I understood him to say, almost everything is related to hydrogen, which means that matter was created and not eternal, and it had a beginning, which is what the Bible teaches. And quantum physics will tell you actually that energy is the smallest amount of matter. So
yeah.
I would argue that science teaches that energy comes first, and now I think you're getting close to the Spirit of God and the power of God, and it creates matter.
I just had a question. How do they know it was 2% if they don't know when the beginning was?
That's exactly what my wife said when she overheard this video. How do they know that? He didn't explain it, and I didn't go get more information on it. So I'm letting you down as a Bible class teacher, okay? We're taking him like, how do you know that? How does that even add up? I don't know.
Assuming that you're correct, but I'm a proponent of young Earth theory. I don't think the universe is billions and billions of years old.
We're going to talk about young Earth versus old Earth in section 6, and we left that out there on purpose, but that kind of comes back to that thought. John Clayton did say, however long you think the sun's been around, which could be millions of years or could be 10,000, 8,000, whatever, it's burned up 2%. Okay, and I'm going to leave the rest of that for class 6. So, okay. Thanks for stirring it up already. You know. All right, I'm going to move on to the next video clip just for the sake of time. Oh, is there any other? I'd probably have a couple minutes. Are there any other comments or thoughts about that? Are we getting that concept? Like, we can start with the idea of, if we were talking to somebody about the idea of a beginning, we could start with hydrogen. And we could have a conversation that could lead us to, so there must be a beginning, right? And they would probably talk to us about hydrogen. They don't always want to talk to us about God, but they would probably talk. We love conversations about hydrogen. I'm sure you talk about that every night around your dinner table, right? Okay? So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and go on, and maybe we're going to actually have extra time to have some discussion at the end.
Now, I want to point out to you that there are many other arguments that could be given to show that there was a beginning. We've looked at 3 very simple illustrations.
I gave you one.
But this is common experience. This is something we can observe. This can be experimentally verified. The atheist assumption that there was no beginning is not justified in terms of the available evidence. And I believe that the reason that atheists would like to suggest there was no beginning is because it eliminates a problem for them. The problem being that if they admit a beginning, they have to deal with the question of cause. Now, many atheists will say, well, I believe there was a beginning. Well, then the question becomes immediately, all right, if you admit there was a beginning, then what was the cause of the beginning? We started out saying we are assuming you exist. We're assuming reality. We're assuming the physical universe is real and our experience is real. And as I said to you, if philosophically you're unwilling to accept that, then all of science, all of our discussion goes out the window. So we're assuming that the universe does exist, and we have shown that there was a beginning. Now the question becomes next, so it's either not caused or it's caused. And by the way, in recent years, there's been a very slick atheist argument on this, because people have said, well, how do you know that something can't come into existence out of nothing by some weird new process we know nothing about, which invalidates all known science? Now, again, we're talking about evidence. And the quote in the first presentation that we made about Stephen Hawking is in this particular area. If you suggest that something can come from nothing, whether it's some process we haven't understood in the past or not, then everything known to modern science is wrong. If something can come from nothing, then the law of conservation of matter energy is wrong, which means everything in chemistry is wrong. And I can hear my chemistry students saying, now I know why I'm flunking chemistry. No. It has something to do with oxidation states and all of that. If something can come from nothing, then the law of conservation of angular momentum is wrong, which means everything in classical physics is wrong. If something can come from nothing, then the law of conservation of electric charge is wrong, which means everything in electronics is wrong, and your computer doesn't work. Now, your computer may not work, but that's not the reason. All known science goes in a trash can if you accept the proposition that something can come from nothing. We're talking about evidence here. We're talking about what we can observe, experimentally verify. To suggest that something can come from nothing, invalidating all known science, is not listening to the evidence, is not looking objectively at the things that we know to be true in the physical world. And even in quantum mechanics, there are no violations of these principles. The problem is, as we pointed out in the first video, that you become entrenched in things that have to do with multiple dimensions. And we'll talk more about that later on. But this is just another suggestion that there, in fact, was a beginning and that the beginning was caused. And suggesting that somehow we may learn something in the future that will change all this is to assume that all of our previous knowledge of science is invalidated. I suggest to you that that's not reasonable, but when new evidence becomes available, we're all constrained to look at it and see how it fits whatever we believe is true about the cosmos as a whole. We had a beginning. The beginning was caused. The last question we want to propose in this series is, okay, what was the cause? What was the nature of the cause? May I suggest to you there's two fundamental possibilities. Possibility number one is that it was caused by something that is not personal. This would be a reliance upon chance. It would have to be something that has no intelligence. There's no mind directing it. It has to be a situation where there is no purpose in the creation. I think a great argument for the existence of God is the fact that if we believe in God, there is a purpose in our existence, and we will talk about that later on. But that's one of the properties that you have if you assume a non-personal cause to the beginning. You're suggesting that chance is the mechanism of the situation, that everything has happened by some type of accidental process. Now, you can say, well, there are natural laws which restrict the range of this, and I wouldn't argue that you can make a model of that type, but you're still relying upon chance as the vehicle to do the process. I want you to take a look at a statement, and this is from a college book known as River Out of Eden by Richard Dawkins, one of the foremost atheists of our day and time. I want you to notice what he says about this. In a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt and other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is. And we dance to its music. Eloquently said, the atheist viewpoint on the cause of the creation. We're going to deal with many of the statements he has. I'm not sure that a person who has lived in the real world can suggest there's no such thing as evil. But we'll talk about that later on. The question is, does this statement mathematically hold? It's not just college kids that get exposed to this. Take a look at a junior high school level book containing a quote by Julian Huxley. And as we read this, I want to ask you to think about, is this a statement of science? We are as much a product of chance as is the falling of a stone to earth or the ebb and flow of the tides. We have just happened. And man was made flesh by a long series of singularly beneficial accidents. Is that a statement of science? Or is this a statement of personal philosophical ideology? We'll talk about that, because our next discussion will be the question of design. Is there design in the creation? If so, there has to be a designer. Is there planning in the creation? If so, there has to be a planner. Or can we rationally and logically and mathematically believe that everything we see, everything we experience, everything we are is a product of chance?
All right, so we just opened a big can of worms there, all right? And we're going to let him go through some of this. We're going to spend the next 2 classes on much more of the design, God and creation, and what we see in the world around us. We're going to get out of space and we're going to come down to earth, okay? But as we go to that, I really wanted to get to that little chart that he put in the beginning that, okay, there's either a beginning or there's not a beginning, and he gave 3 arguments in this. One of them was hydrogen, the sun, that energy. There were others that he gave, okay? And you could go back and watch that. But as a matter of fact, there's fact to the matter that there is evidence that there was a beginning, okay? So if we start with, is there a beginning or is there not a beginning? And then the next question is, then what caused the beginning? Genesis 1:1, God caused the beginning, okay? Or the only other choice I can think of would be random chance. And where are we at? And there was another highly scientific segment I would have loved to show you and discuss to give you another thing like hydrogen there is evidence to the idea of a beginning. But I really wanted to do this one because it's going to set the stage for another little discussion I want to have pretty quickly. But it's also going to set the stage for where Kevin goes next week in the idea of the design that we see around us, okay? So, again, from John Clayton's view, I'm going to have a discussion with an atheist who does not believe in the Bible, that is looking around. Maybe we've just moved them to, well, there's a beginning. Maybe they already believed there was a beginning. But now we're getting into then what made that happen? What made the beginning happen? It's just building blocks for that. And I'll go ahead and say, and then I'll open up for discussion, is that textbooks in junior high courses, textbooks in our college courses in the name, this is all about beginnings and all of that, and they're in science textbooks, not theology. There's another subject you can major in that talks about you just ponder the crazy things of life, but I can't think of what that one is. But it's not in those sections. It's in the science section. That we're here by random chance, and the DNA just exists, and we dance to its music. Okay? Because it all happened by chance. There's a beginning, but it all happened by chance. And here we're at, which road would any individual person go down? There's a choice here. God gave us choice. Okay? Thoughts, comments on that?
His first assumption of saying, do we exist? I think that's in question now. So, that's something that's going to be pressured in the schools is artificial intelligence, are we in a simulation?
Yeah.
So, just throwing that out he took that off the plate, but that's out there.
Do we exist? The irony is there's even an old discussion about, did Jesus really exist, or was he in just some sort of spiritual form, or was he really human? So there's all kinds of arguments. We're not getting into Jesus and all of that, but there was even a thought that maybe he didn't really exist, and that was a way to explain how he could come and go and do the things that he did. Okay, I think that mankind can come up with a whole lot of things that sound incredibly important in the moment, like the Earth is flat. Okay, we eventually got a bigger picture of the Earth and went, no, it's round. Okay, okay.
Hit on every single point.
Yeah.
Until they prove that that's not it.
Yeah.
And right now the point is, are we a simulation?
Yeah.
Is it string theory? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And they're going to hit every one of those.
Yeah.
To disprove.
Yeah. And there's always going to be choice, and there's going to be extreme people out there representing extreme things. And quite honestly, if I'm just trying to strengthen my own faith, I don't need to answer every question along that line. There might be other people that do, okay? If I'm going to reach out to people, and I do want to spend a few minutes on this, who might be struggling with some of this, or they have an opposite belief, they're still going to come down to choice. I think how we go about conversations with people like that. But to me, what I'm saying is I'm not trying to fight the whole entire scientific community. How can I be powerful with one person and what they believe, and I'm not worried about the whole entire scientific community?
This is important for us. I think I've shared my story. I was an atheist. He talks about the school books and so on. So you cannot start with someone like that with, well, let's open up the Bible and see what it says. Because, from that perspective, the Bible is just a book written by somebody. So you have to start and show that. And, the idea that there was a beginning, that there was a creator, and those arguments that start from a basis of, I love what he says, that, if science and religion disagree, then you either have bad science or bad religion or both, because God is the one that created it, and the mechanisms that he created it by are observable and are important. Now, there's lots of interpretation and lots of room as you get into there for how things happen, but it's important for us, but it's even important if we're going to have influence in this world and share our faith with people that don't have faith, which is really what we're called to do. So this is very important, is all I'm saying.
Dave?
So I agree with everything that's being said, but the problem is I've had discussions like this, and if the foundation of our discussions with an atheist is to bring it back to the foundational purpose of there has to be a beginning. And then the next logical question is, who created it? Something that's always been. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That's my answer. That's our answer.
So
we can go to the supernatural and all those things. I get all that. But if we're trying to base it on science and the idea that everything has to have come from something, and then we say what created something, everything, us, the earth, is something that's always existed and was never had a beginning. Like, that's pretty tough for us in the brain to wrap our mind around.
It's tough, yeah.
Including me.
Absolutely.
These conversations.
Well, and the question can be, well, where then did God come from? And, well, we're saying he's eternal. Well, and then that can be a point where you got to let people, I call it letting it bake. You got to let them just go away and ponder. And let the Holy Spirit, I would pray, give them a better thing of it, I'm going to go way over time, and I may have to skip my last segment, but I just wanted to say this, that he did give an argument of how supposedly something could come from nothing. Well, to me, I want to say you just said a miracle, because otherwise it violates everything that we know, right? But did Jesus do that? Well, he turned water, not nothing, he turned water into wine. Could Jesus have made wine from nothing? I say yes to that question. Can't prove it to you, but I say yes to that. But maybe it was too complicated for what it would have done to the laws of nature and science for him to totally make that happen. And so the best way for him to move ahead and not create too much of a problem in this world was take something that was and make it something else. Because maybe it causes too many problems when you absolutely violate the laws of science. Maybe, okay?
Like your example, you notice in Genesis when he created man, he didn't just make him, he took dust of the earth or the elements of the earth and created him.
Yeah.
A little bit of levity here over what he's saying. God and Satan were having a conversation. Satan says, I can do the same thing. You can, I can make a man too. And so Satan picked up a handful of dirt and God said, hold it. He said, get your own dirt.
Okay. I'm going to go into the last segment because I want to start putting some heart into this, okay? Watch this and see how, is this effective evangelism? All right? This is not John Clayton, all right?
our brain cells.
Let me ask you this
Yes.
question. What's your name, ma'am?
Will eventually
I'm so
die.
rude. I didn't even ask you your name.
My name's Kelly.
My name's Preston.
Preston, nice to meet you.
So you just said something very interesting. You said that that you believe in science.
Kelly's
Yes.
cool.
So
Because there's
Science
evidence
is God. That's another thing.
yeah. So why can't you believe in God and science?
because they mostly contradict themselves.
How?
Because creationism is total opposite of evolution. Yes.
Well, that's not true, right? Well, so you believe?
Do you believe we've evolved as humans over the years?
No, I don't.
Do you believe that viruses evolve?
Yeah, I could believe that I believe that.
Do you believe that animals have evolved over the years?
You asking me questions and you're not letting me answer.
Okay.
Right. So I don't necessarily believe in something evolving, but I believe that something can adapt, right? So for example, polar bears was not always white and they wasn't always the size that they were, right? That a piece of the earth broke off, right? And they drifted, right? You know about this, right? They drifted to Antarctica, right? So they adapted to their environment. That's not evolution. That's just I think all creatures can adapt.
How do you think the penguins on Noah's Ark got all the way over from Antarctica?
Wait, no.
Do you know there's trees on the earth today older than the Great Flood?
Let me.
Everything was destroyed in the Great Flood.
Let me ask you this. No, wait. Let me just ask you this one question real quick.
Let me ask you this question.
Wait.
Why do you believe? Why do you believe?
I can tell you why. Why? Right? Because I believe that God defines science. Let me just
No,
explain.
let me tell you what is your reason for believing.
I'm gonna tell you. You gotta let me explain it to you, right? You said that you believe in science.
Yes.
Right? So technically what you believe is what? Time, space, and matter.
Yes.
Right? So you believe that if something doesn't fit within the logic of time, space, and matter.
You've been watching TV.
No. I haven't been watching. I didn't really get this from TV, right? So what you believe is essentially as an atheist, if something doesn't fit within the God frames of time, space, and matter, that it cannot be proved logically. That's what you believe. That if it doesn't fit within the frame.
Not necessarily.
Well,
not necessarily.
Well,
I believe in evidence that is touchable. I believe in evidence
that's matter. That's matter.
That's repeatable.
That's time.
That can be proven by
time.
Constant tests.
Well, when you said science, right?
But nobody's been able to prove that there's a God.
Well, hear me out. Listen to what I'm saying. You're not letting me finish. What you just said was anything that's touchable is matter.
Yes.
The second thing that you said, that was time, right? And the heavens is the space, right? So when you say that you believe in science, all of science consists of is three things. It is time, space, and matter. You can't have science. Hear me out. Let me finish. You can't have science without those three things. The Bible tells you why God doesn't.
The Bible was written by man.
That video is 50 minutes long, and they just keep going back and forth. It's interesting. She quotes the Bible. Where did she get the flood destroyed everything? She quotes the Bible, okay. But I guess too many times, to me, that felt like an intense argument. He's stuttering because of the intensity of the conversation, okay. And so I guess I just want to come back to okay, if we're going to have a hydrogen discussion with somebody, if we're going to talk about a beginning or not a beginning, hopefully we can do it in a way that we can lovingly, probably somebody we're already in relationship with, that we're friends with. These are two strangers on a street, and he was talking to one guy, and then this lady had to chime in her thing, and you could, in the beginning, you kind of hear the other guy, you know. And if the first guy was on the defensive, he wasn't sure he believed in creation and Jesus and all of that, but he believed in God. And when she said there was no God, he said, I'll give you proof there's a God. Go to sleep, and when you wake up in the morning, that proves there's a God. Okay? And it's like, okay, that's maybe where we exist, you know, back to that conversation. What I guess I want to encourage is that as we go through tools and we go through things to talk about, this is not just to get into arguments with people. This is not just to you know, hopefully that as we come across people that are really like, for whatever reason, they're allowing us to enter in this conversation with them, that we can come with love and respect. And we'll have some tools off of this, today is all about, well, there's X amount of hydrogen. There was a beginning. We can build these tools into that conversation, and maybe over time we can do that. I think there's many ways to evangelize, and I know I'm kind of going over time, so I'll try to wrap this up in just a minute. I know there are many ways to evangelize, and I believe the most effective way is for the way that person's brain works. For John Clayton and Lee Strobel, they had the kind of brain that they need to look at the evidences, and that was the point of what converted them. Okay? I work at a place called Midwestern Children's Home with traumatized children. Science and evidences, they're out of whack on all that. But they know what hurt means. And if you can help them understand hurt and healing, that's going to be the way that you evangelize them. Because that is where they're at. Okay? There's many ways. And so what we have to figure out is how is this person brain wired? What are the things they're most concerned about? And that's going to be the door to their heart and their faith, not just an exercise in talking about hydrogen, okay? And so I want to keep that as a part of this, that we bring up hydrogen to almost most of the kids I live with on a regular basis, and they're like, what's hydrogen? I don't even know what you're talking about. That's a foreign language. I just said a foreign word to them, okay? But we know there are people that are very scientifically based. This woman was actually pretty scientifically based. She had studied some stuff. She knows there's a tree that outdates the flood. We'll talk about that, okay? So I pray that as we go through this and we start, because this was my thought. I learned something new. Let me go try it out on somebody, okay? Absolutely. If you're really going to quote John Clayton, you might need to study a little bit more, okay? Be careful. Try out new things. Have new conversations. That's what this is about. But let's love people above all else, all right? So I'm like way over. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll conclude. Father, you are so good. We're thankful to be called your children. We're amazed at your creation, of how you set science in motion in the beginning. Thank you for what we can see and know that is factual, that points us to you. Father, help us in our faith in all things, as we deal with hurts, as we deal with logic, as we deal with emotions, to grow closer to unshakable faith. Thank you for your grace, most of all, through our journey. And we pray all this through Jesus' name. Amen.